Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Sarah Friedman, ArtsFund's Vice President of Development, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to our first ever virtual pop-up featuring a conversation between Donald Byrd, Artistic Director of Spectrum Dance Theater, and ArtsFund's President and CEO, Michael Greer. We've never done a virtual pop-up, so we're really excited that you decided to join us tonight. Pop-ups aim to give you an insider's look at our incredible arts and culture organizations and are presented as a thank you to you for your engagement and support. Before we begin, I'd like to express our gratitude to Spectrum Dance Theater for providing us with complimentary access to their new dance film, Lyric Suite. If you haven't yet watched Lyric Suite, you have until Friday at midnight to do so. At ArtsFund, we've been working hard to support our cultural partners as they serve our community throughout the pandemic. September marked the end of our fiscal year, and we're proud that our total grant making for 2020 surpassed $5.5 million, awarded through 195 grants to 113 organizations. That's on top of critical advocacy, leadership, and capacity building programs. This work provided relief and hope to many, but of course, there's still so much more to do. The pandemic has significantly impacted the sector in ways big and small, positive and negative. In many cases, driving innovation and much needed introspection. Even with often daunting obstacles, arts organizations such as Spectrum Dance Theater are finding new ways to deliver vital programming, and many are connecting with broader audiences. We are continually inspired by the creativity of our cultural partners and are so grateful to all of you for helping to make that work possible. A few housekeeping notes. We invite you to react and comment in the chat. Be sure to introduce yourself, but if you have questions you'd like Michael to pose, please use the Q&A function. Your cameras and mics have been disabled, and we are recording tonight's pop-up and hope to have a recording available to you soon. And now I'd like to introduce ArtsFund's President and CEO, Michael Greer. Some of you may have met Michael at our virtual luncheon in September. He took on his role at ArtsFund in the beginning of June, having previously served as the Executive Director of Oregon Ballet Theater. Michael has an array of experience in both the nonprofit arts community as well as the business community, and we're excited for his tenure at ArtsFund. Take it away, Michael.
Thanks, Sarah. And thanks to everyone for joining us tonight. I'm really excited about this conversation with Spectrum Dance Theater's Artistic Director, Donald Byrd. As Sarah mentioned, if you have any questions for Donald during the conversation, please submit them using the Q&A box on your screen, and I will try to get to as many as I can as time allows. I'd like to start by introducing Donald, and forgive me, someone with as many accomplishments as him, I'm going to just read this introduction so that I don't get anything wrong. But Donald Byrd has been the Artistic Director of Spectrum Dance Theater since December 2002. Formerly, he was Artistic Director of Donald Byrd, The Group, a critically acclaimed contemporary dance company founded in Los Angeles and later based in New York that toured both nationally and internationally. His career has been long and complex, and his choreographic and theatrical interests are broad. The New York Times describes him as a choreographer with multiple personalities and unabashed eclectic. He is a Tony-nominated award choreographer for his work on The Color Purple and a Bessie Award-winning choreographer for his work on The Minstrel Show. Mr. Byrd has frequently been referred to as a citizen artist, a descriptive that perfectly aligns him with an important component of Spectrum Dance Theater's mission and Mr. Byrd's personal belief: dance as an art form and as a social and civic instrument. And with that, I would like to welcome Donald tonight. Thank you very, very much for joining us, and thanks for taking the time.
Great, I'm happy to be here.
Fantastic. I wanted to start this conversation with a really interesting quote that you had put it on the website, and you mentioned it as something that was really driving the 2021 season. And you wrote, "How might life be lived in the near future after humans have adapted?" And that was an underlining theme of the season. And can you talk a little bit more about that and how the programs reflect that?
Yeah, Well, earlier, I think just that when the pandemic began, when the lockdown happened, I think one of the things that was really frightening to me is this the end? You know,
Mm.
in the end in a lot of ways. And so the quote actually is a reference to climate change, to the climate crisis, and so in thinking about that, the what there's a kind of in that quote, there's a sense of hope. The idea that that human beings' existence on the planet would not end, but we would find a way to adapt to it. Things would not be the way they were before, but we would find some way to continue living and having lives, and the things that were important to us, like family and community, would still be there. So in some ways, when the pandemic happened, it underscored those things for me. And so what I'm living in now, and many people are living in, I think most people, is they're living in a place where they are having to adapt. And so the wonderful thing about adaptation is that you don't have time to complain, that you adapt. And so what not having time to complain does is that, number one, it stops you from worrying so much. You stop, my favorite new word, fretting. It stops you from fretting, and you just kind of live your life the best you can with some sense of hope.
That's really interesting, because the other quote that you have out there is fantastic, and it surrounds this idea of hope, and that is that hope locates itself in the premise that we don't know what will happen, and that in the spaciousness of uncertainty is room to act.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really that quote really moved me, because what we're hearing right now is that COVID has really allowed the arts and culture sector the freedom to kind of challenge and change some assumptions about itself. And how do you see our arts community kind of acting or reacting to this space of uncertainty? And like, how are they reacting to this room to act that you talk about in spaciousness?
Well, I just have to say that I wish I had said that. I mean, it's a quote that I've been using to frame our season. So uh, so the question is how, say it again.
I'm curious how you see our sector really acting and reacting, like through this hope. And you mentioned that you see hope in the midst of COVID, and in the midst of all the turmoil that's been going on in the past year. How do you see us acting in that as a sector?
Well, I think the biggest thing that I see is people are, arts organizations, and I know the dance organizations the best, and so that they are they're just championing along. That they just kind of show up. They're still showing up. They're figuring out how to show up and get the job done, get the work done that they do. So an example is, at Spectrum we're doing that, but I want to mention P&B because I started a commission with them this week, and it was supposed to be a certain way. And then on Sunday, I get an email from Peter, I think it was, or a telephone call, I don't remember, and said, okay, he goes, oh my God, I thought we were going to be able to make it through, but so we have to kind of change some things. And so one of the things is that the rehearsals are happening via Zoom, which some of that would have happened anyway. But now the dancers can't even be in the same room with each other. Mm. And so each dancer is in a studio, and I'm on Zoom. My assistant is on Zoom in another studio. And so we are, the work is being made in spite of the fact that we can't be together. And I think that's happening. I think many artists have found that how can I, which for artists is the important question, is how can I continue to make my work? That is the most important thing. And I think, as I said to you once before, Michael, the thing is that almost is before how do I be safe? You know, we have to stop for a moment and say, okay, I want to make the work, but I also have to be safe. So I think that what's happening for, you know, artists and arts organizations are used to having to kind of problem solve, figure things out. And there's a kind of built-in struggle to it all. And so the thing is that we learn not to be, number one, distracted by the struggle. You keep doing what you're doing. And also we've learned to not be, what's the word? To lose our enthusiasm for what we do because there's struggle and effort involved.
You know, that's really interesting for those on the call or the webinar today that don't know. So I spent about 6 years and 6 seasons as a professional dancer, and you're talking about the way that dancers are approaching this work and that they're forced to approach this work during this time. Lyric Suite was really amazing for me to watch because as a former dancer, I was amazed by the level of acting and the level of artistry beyond how I think I had interpreted, you know, dance as being on stage and projecting to a house that is across a pit or a proscenium and all of that. And I was curious how you prepared the dancers for such an intimate delivery, especially on such an intimate and personal topic, and how they reacted to that.
All right. Well, I think one of the things that I knew, there were two projects that I thought that when we decided that we were going to come back. One of them involved everybody working together, and the other one was this one that originally, which turned into Lyric Suite, which this thing was called 14 Solos. I think it's what it was called originally. Mm-hmm. And in the process of meeting with Tara Beach, who's Spectrum's executive director, and I was saying, well, I'm thinking about maybe I'll start with the solos. And she goes, I would feel more comfortable if you did that, because then that gives us time to figure out how we can kind of work. So the Lyric Suite came about because of the idea of creating solos for each one of the dancers in the company. And so it required that I spend time, and all of it was virtual. I was not in, I think I was only in the room with them once during the creation part. It was all done via Zoom, and working with them and kind of cycling through the dancers in each group. So we are 12 dancers at Spectrum, and we were in two pods of 5 and one pod of 2. And the pod of 2 was a couple that cohabitate, and that they, you know, and they were in Bremerton. So the other pods actually came into the studio, and they were in, each pod was in their own studio. So I think that the process of devising the solos allowed me to get to know the dancers a little bit better. I think I know them already, but pretty well. But it also, it was kind of, I had to lean into my relationship with them in some ways and ask some things from them that maybe in a normal, you know, situation I probably wouldn't ask. So one of the things was I wrote a script that described what each scene would be. The dancers got the script. They didn't know which part they were going to do. I didn't even know which part they were going to do. So during the course of the first week of rehearsal and watching them, then I cast it at the end of the week. And then it was a matter of just kind of working. We had 3 weeks total, well, 2 weeks after I had cast, to kind of get it together, to hire, to find the collaborators. I think I'd already found the collaborators, I think, but the idea with the dancers was that daily one-on-one with them was really significant in terms of creating not only what the movement was and what the feeling was, but also trust and which I think could only happen because of the one-on-one. It was almost like I was in the room with them, just the two of us, or every time.
It's fascinating. One of the things that we talked about, I think on Monday when we spoke a little bit, was the relationship between the solos and the dancers.
Mm-hmm.
And you had all of these ideas in your mind before putting them on a dancer. Can you talk a little bit about how you matched what was in your mind with the artist?
Yeah, I think one of the things that what I do is I'm always, for myself, investigating with the dancers. They don't know this. I hope they're not listening. No, I'm joking. I'm always investigating what their emotional capacity is.
Mm.
And so there's some people that have more emotional capacity, and some of that is a result of their age or their life, the life that they've lived. And other people don't have that same range. And so creating something that was appropriate for the emotional capacity of the particular dancer. And so the thing is that how I also thought of it was that there were no, everything about the dancer was an asset. There were no deficits. I was only interested in what the assets are of each one of the dancers. And so that determined what solo they got in some ways, or how the solo developed, or how I thought it should develop. So the woman in the chair, Nia Mina Minor, she has a kind of profound internal life, I think. That's my assessment of her. And it's quite remarkable. And so she could deal with stillness in a way that somebody else could not. She could just sit in a chair. And once she understood what was happening while she was sitting in the chair, then she was able to bring that. She has the capacity to bring that to life. So that's one example.
That's fascinating, and it kind of dovetails into the next question that I had for you, was that around the partnerships and the cinematography and the delivery method is so different from what things were even 12 months ago, 10 months ago.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how those partners were chosen and how that relationship developed, also in a digital world or in a socially distanced world? Like,
Right.
talk a little bit, and I believe it was Egan.
It's Egan.
Yes.
So Egan is somebody who had done some work with Spectrum when we did a rap on race, and he had developed some marketing material for video marketing material for us. And I thought he was pretty fantastic. And so he was always in the back of my head of somebody that I would like to work with. And one of the things about the COVID, we had some internal conversations during the lockdown, the early days of the lockdown. And one of the things that I said is that, well, we need to look at that our collaborators going forward may not be the same kinds of collaborators that we've had in the past. They may be, but we maybe need to be looking at other kinds of collaborators. And so Egan kind of fell into that category of a collaborator in terms of creating something for the company, an artistic piece that had not been there before. So and also one of the things I wanted to do, and I don't mean this in a disparaging way, but a lot of the work that's out there with dance right now, especially young dancers and emerging, artists, and it makes perfect sense. They don't have a lot of resources, and so people get a camera and they go outside and they make a dance, and I said, and that's really great, and I've seen some really wonderful stuff. But I said, Spectrum has a bigger profile, and so we need to be more. We need to be more aspirational in terms of what we're trying to do, making something big, and and also I can be a little grandiose, so maybe it needs to fit into grandiosity a little bit. And so, it kind of grew out of wanting to tell a story or make a dance theater work that was in fact cinematic and that was not something that I could do better on stage. It was to make something that this piece, maybe it could be on stage, but probably it could not be reproduced on stage.
That's fascinating. I think in this time, it really shows how the creative, I think the creative workers are really so adept at pivoting and taking the best out of a situation and turning it into something new and something beautiful. And I had a question for you about, Lyric Suite is just the beginning of this season. And you've got, the title being Imagining Futures, focusing on race, social justice, and climate change. Those are huge topics for anyone. Can you talk a little bit more about how some of the upcoming works touch around race, social justice, and particularly climate crisis? Like, I'm really curious about how that is, forming into some of your future work.
Right. The two pieces that will focus on that are Pool, and the other one is After. And so there's a lot of stuff around those. One of those is that with Pool, Pool was influenced by a series of speculative photographs that were done by a British organization called Squint Opera. And they kind of imagined, the photographs imagined a world like around 2090, when all of, as they say, all the catastrophic effects of climate change we've already experienced, and people have started to have adapted. And so, that's and so I was kind of fascinated by that because of the hope part, in that. If you say they've adapted, that means that you have hope that we'll be able to get through it. But I was also interested in the climate gap, which is, the climate gap is a thought, a conversation around how minority communities will be disproportionately affected by climate change. And so in this world of Pool, I've kind of imagined a place that's in around 2090, and it is in some ways, Greta Thunberg has been kind of, what's the word when you become a saint? Beatified, but she's like a saint to people. And so her presence is always there. And also working with the idea of Afrofuturism. And so that the notion that the influence of African and people of African descent on this community that we are looking at in this world of Pool is that that presence, that feeling, those influences are there. And so I think maybe what I'm trying to say in some ways is that I become more interested, I think, in storytelling. Rather than, I've always been interested in storytelling, and I've always done abstract dance, but I've been more recently been, number one, interested in storytelling in a way that I have not been before. I've been interested in the idea of imagining, futures or imagination. What's the role of imagination in creating this work? I think also that's what's happened as a result of that of the pandemic is the notion of Black people and people of color and their impact on our society and our culture. And it feels like to me that it's kind of like this, BIPOC people have been kind of beneath the surface, and that with the death of George Floyd and the kind of profound emergence of Black Lives Matter, those conversations, Black people and conversations around Blackness and people of color kind of has risen to the surface in a way that it has not been in the past, I think, and my hope is that it'll stay that way. So, and also that relationship of that there's kind of an assumption that has been out there that Black people don't care about climate change. And so one of the things was to kind of bring a kind of Black focus to the notion of this, the climate issues that we are currently facing.
It's fascinating that you say that, because, using dance to storytell about climate change through the perspective of a Black man is something that I think is really unique. And one of the things that we talked about earlier was the ability for what has happened this year to allow for more of a normalization of the two of us having a conversation and not having to have to be about anything that is necessarily Black or of color, but it can be about dance and climate change.
Yeah.
And the way that that allows for more storytelling from our from people of color's perspective. I'm really curious to hear more about again, as a dancer that kind of grew up in the 80s and 90s, there was a handful of really influential Black choreographers and dancers, and I'm thinking of Alvin Ailey, of Judith Jamison, Virginia Johnson, Lauren Anderson, Albert Evans, Mel Tomlinson. I mean, you can count them all on two hands, and I think you are of that group. And what do you recognize your place really in making dance accessible to young people of color in this country and probably around the world? I mean, how does that feel now that you've become more established and the world has definitely changed? And I think it's opened up substantially to young people of color, still not enough. But I mean, how do you feel about your role in that from, that time in New York to where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a difficult question, because actually I never thought about it. And the only reason that I do think about it now is because young people tell me. They go, I get emails, or they say, do you know that you're like, oh, blah, blah. I go, no, I didn't know that, and but it is really, so I feel like I have that, I mean, it feels good, because I've always said early on from the beginning of my dance making career, I wanted to be thought of that way, like those people. They were, and not in a kind of ego kind of way, even though I'm sure that was there too, because with any young person it's gonna be there, and any artist is going to be there. But I think I wanted to do it because I was really I wanted to make a contribution, and so I recognize those modern dance giants and other giants in the world of dance as the people that have made contributions. So I wanted, I think, the mantle, because it seemed that the mantle allowed for influence and to be able to contribute. And that's what I really wanted to do. And I love dance. I love dance. And so I have devoted my life to dance because I love it and I believe in it and its capacity to transform people. And so that's really the only reason I do it. I mean, I've managed to hold on to those beliefs all of this time. And so that's the thing that gets me up in the morning, that keeps me going during the day, that keeps me still moving forward during this time of the pandemic. And so it's because of a profound love for dance and admiration and respect for those people that came before, that contributed, because they, in some ways they were not professionals. I mean, they were, but the notion of how we think of professionalism now, that's not how they were. And so that's not how life was then. And I think also the way I go about doing what I do in some ways is in a pre-dance professionalized kind of way of thinking about it. It is really about the satisfaction of making work and making contributions to people through how they receive that work. So in the context of the people that you named, some of them are my friends that are, so I don't know. It's just not something I think about really, I just kind of like, I don't think about it. I mean,
Well,
it's nice that other people think about it, and I get that, and I appreciate that, and that they think of me that way. But often when people say something to me about it, I'm kind of speechless. I don't know what to say. I can get out, thank you. But that's about it.
well, I think as and I might still be able to say this, but as one of those younger people who are and were inspired to see, a handful of, for me particularly, Black men that were able to influence me and other people in the dance world. I will say a personal thank you, but it's really impressive to see that you're still doing that and still inspiring young people today, particularly young people of color in the field. You have a rap sheet that is very long. You are the 2019 Doris Duke Artist Award, 2016 James R. Ray Distinguished Artist Award. You've been written about in the New York Times. The list goes on and on and on. At this point in your life, and I want to say, like, what are you most proud of? But what are some things that really stand out for you in terms of accomplishments or things that you want to be remembered by in the future?
Right. I think what stands out for me is the transformation that happened when I arrived in Seattle from New York. Number one, I never thought I could live any place other than in New York City. It's just like, even though I had lived in Los Angeles and blah, 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 but once I was kind of like into that New York thing, I go like, this is the only place I can live. These are my people that are here. And so when I closed my company in 2002, it was, I really kind of didn't know what to do for a while. It was a really, just so this little story, it's a really interesting experience. I was talking to, there's a choreographer named David Parsons, and I was talking to him. I said, I'm going to close my company. I'd also talked to Kent Stoll, who was then the artistic director at Pacific Northwest Ballet. And they had made suggestions that were really useful, that were really helpful. Kent said to me, you need to close it on your terms. Don't wait for it to shut down because whatever difficulties and problems that it's having, you decide we're going to close it, so then you know what actions you need to take. And then David Parsons says something that was really useful. He said, have a press conference. And I said, have a press conference? Why would I have a press conference? And he said, because people will know that you're available. And so I had a press conference. And so, and people knew that I was available. And I started to get inquiries if I was to get headhunted to run dance companies. And I realized, the point of all of this is I realized that I love dance companies. I love what happens in a dance company. I love that daily engagement with dancers and making work and growing that way. And that was really important to me. So I said, after I closed my company, I said, I have to work with another dance company. I don't want to be a freelance artist. And so, long story short, I ended up at Spectrum. And so Seattle, as you know, is one of the most white cities in the country, and Spectrum actually was a reflection of that. Even though the previous the founders had made an effort to have people of color, but still the feeling of it was still that it was because it was a white-led organization, and so it felt like that. And so, and it was a jazz dance company, and that was a sensibility that was not what I was interested in doing. And so, one of the things that happened, in order to get kind of have dancers at a certain level or that I was interested in, I would have auditions in New York and primarily in New York. And then I kind of opened it up where I would have them in Philly and like that. And so, so that I got a lot of dancers of color, Black dancers and dancers of color. And one of the interesting things was after a while, when they would leave Spectrum, they would not leave Seattle.
Mm.
They would stay in Seattle. And they started to contribute to not only the dance life in Seattle, but also to the artistic life of Seattle as well. And so I'm really proud of the fact that I helped that along by bringing, and it's been really slow, really, really slow, but it's always been very much a part of my thinking about how to, I almost said infiltrate, but how, how can the Black people infiltrate, so that's what so I think in some ways I'm really proud of that in terms of my contributions to Seattle, the dance scene in Seattle. I mean, I am proud of the artistic works that I've created and how they influence people and, dance people. And, but I think that the other reason that I wanted to, why I decided I would come to Seattle was from all the touring that my previous company had done. I always felt like we were learning a lot about community, but we didn't have a community to share it with, really. New York really is not a community, in some ways. I mean, so to be able to contribute to this community here in Seattle was really important to me. I got a chance to do something I wanted to do. So in terms of contribution. So I think that maybe that's the thing I'm most proud of, maybe. I don't know.
I was going to say it's got to be hard to pick one thing, and I hate to have you, pinned down to something like that. We talked earlier about the breadth of change that you've seen in the world, and you just spoke to your role in that, the filtration, and the to be involved in the creation of a culture, and part of a foundation of a culture here in Seattle. You were born in Clearwater, Florida, and you mentioned the
Well,
late.
I was actually born in New London, North Carolina.
Oh, okay. You were raised in Clearwater, correct?
It's in Clearwater for the most part, yes.
And the change that you have seen over the course of your lifetime and been a part of is fantastic. How do you see that influencing where you want to go next? Like, how do you see all that change? I mean, I think you talked a little bit about kind of an acknowledgement that you have been a part of that change, and that's one of the things that you're most proud of. And how do you leverage that to, what's coming in the future for Spectrum or just for Donald Byrd?
Right. I think one of the interesting things is that, kind of like living through the Jim Crow era, like when it was at its most kind of pumped up, and kind of understanding that. And I think in the conversations that we're having right now, or that we want to have in the world right now about how do we, the kind of division that was very not conscious, was very much there with this last election. So you got people of color and college educated people, and then you have white working people who feel really disconnected from many of the values that that the other group has. And so they don't really understand. And I think the other group, nobody really understands that the real impact of our history in terms of the racial injustice. Like, that in like a couple of generations, it does not go away, the impact. I mean, that's why sometimes it's not only alarming, but also kind of like infuriating when some white people will say, why don't you just get over it? It's not that easy because it is so entrenched and so embedded, like the whole move, last several months about institutionalized racism, just systemic racism, like that's true. It's just there. It's just baked into the whole thing. And so one of the things that I think I want my work to do is bring, I think I was applying for this grant 10 years ago, and they asked some really profound questions, which, I thought like, wow, that's hard, and
We should take note at ArtsFund. We should take note of those questions.
Yeah, like take those questions out. No, but it was really good because the thing that I decided for myself that a lot of artwork, dance is actually about taking you out of reality. People want to be taken. They say they want to be taken out of reality, and so it is. People, we do work, we make work that takes people out of reality. And I decided I didn't want to do that, that I want to take people, I put them into reality. When I say society, I mean, put them into reality. That's what I really wanted, not to run. It's not something to escape from. It's not an escape vehicle. The arts are, it is actually something, they are, the arts are vehicles that bring you closer to what is the most challenging in the world for you. And so they say that, in 12-step programs, first you have to acknowledge step one, acknowledge what the problem is. It's the same thing. You have to acknowledge that this is our reality. This is a problem. And only then can we begin to do something about it. But you have to acknowledge it. And so what I want my work to do is to help people be able to acknowledge those things that are really challenging. And so some of it is about excavating the history that has been buried, bringing it to the consciousness, bringing it to the forefront of people's minds, And so, I mean, and so that people learn, I mean me really, so that I learn not to escape, to desire to escape from reality. That reality, and in the reality on a personal level, in many ways, I spent a lot of my life, running away from reality in some ways, at some points in my life, dance was a way of escaping reality. What's that joke? Denial is not a river in Egypt. But I was expert at that. I was great at denial and running away and escaping from. So what I feel like my job then is to kind of be a facilitator, and I'm not perfect at it. You know what I mean? I'm learning all the time too. So I'm not trying to pump myself up as being that, but being a facilitator to say that it's okay to look at these challenges that our lives present to us, and that in some ways there's a kind of freedom in that.
I wanted to remind the group that we've got about 13 or less minutes left. So if you have any questions, please submit them in via the Q&A box, and we'll try to get those to Donald before the end of the evening. But Donald, I think it's really fascinating what you were just talking about as in regard to using arts and culture to bring people into reality.
Right.
And there's, ArtsFund has been talking about this a lot, and I think it's really present within our community across disciplines, and that is the ability to have art and culture as a tool for social change, and a tool for community building. And that speaks really well to this idea of not taking people away or up to that, whatever the kind of elitist, escapism, but really back into community. And I love the fact that you're talking about how dance and art in general can do that.
Yeah. I do want to say, I'm not saying that that's what every artist should do, because every artist isn't interested in that. I'm just saying that that's what I do, and that that's the thing that drives me. I mean, in some ways, you want to say that our art portfolio should be really, really diverse. And I don't have any problems with, abstract work or stuff that doesn't do that, that's escapism. I like a good escape, give me Star Trek any day, and so I love it. So, but for me, what is most satisfying when I have an artistic experience, when I actually am challenged by that experience, when I'm sitting there, what I've said sometimes in some writings is that it is a kind of struggle with self, that you sit there and you are questioning and asking questions while you are watching. So like one of my favorite things is when I go like, I don't like this, when that pops in my head. And then I think to myself, well, why don't you like it? Is it what you're seeing that you don't like, or is it that you didn't eat enough earlier today, and so what you're seeing is colored by that? What is it? And so that allows me to stay with something, and so that later I'm actually able to make some sort of assessment, because rather than kind of dismissing something at the beginning. But I like that being in that space of struggle when I'm watching or having an artistic experience.
We've got a question in the chat box, which I think is great, and I've never asked you this question, and we've had a couple conversations now. But Kelly is asking, what are the moments from your past that led you to being a dancer and choreographer?
The moment in my past, right? Okay, so I think there's a lot of moments. I always danced as a child. It was a joke in my family that I was going to be either a performer or a lawyer. So,
there's a joke in there somewhere, but
yeah, there is a joke in there somewhere. So I was kind of, so it was that. I liked, as a child, watching all of the Hollywood musicals. When I was 16, I think I was 16, so I saw Eddie Villela and Patricia McBride from the New York City Ballet do a lecture demonstration. I was curious about it. I knew the music they were dancing to, it was Stravinsky. And so because I studied classical music, I knew Stravinsky, and I knew about Balanchine, but I had no idea what any of that looked like. So I saw that, I was like, ooh, I like that. And then later in college, I was standing in front of the bookstore on a hill, and I looked down the hill, and there was this beautiful young woman walking. I mean, I had never seen anybody move like that before. So I went running down the hill, and I said to her, "You're so amazing looking. Why do you look like that? Why do you move like that?" And she just kind of looked at me, and she smiled, and she said, "Because I am a ballet dancer." This was a young Black woman from New York City. And then I said, I saw her at dinner, and I said, I have to figure out how to talk to her. So I started asking her questions about dancing and blah, blah, blah. I mean, we're still kind of friendly today. I mean, she lives in Europe, but that was the thing. And then later, I think what happened, I mean, that was the dancing that got me into the physical part of actually doing dance, but the choreographic part, when I was dancing with Gus Solomons Jr., and he was the dean of the dance school at Cal Arts, and the company was there. And I started making dance because the rehearsals weren't as long, and so I needed something to do. And I discovered that I really loved it, making the dances. And so, and I felt and thought at the time that all of my interests, everything I had always been interested in was contained inside of choreography. I mean, I was interested, the body moving. I was interested in music. I was interested in philosophy. I was interested in, the theater and plays. And so I could do it all inside the choreographic realm. And so I think that answered the question.
I've got to laugh, Donald, because mine was a woman named Abigail, and I was about 12. And so there's a theme there. We have one other question.
Well, her name is Beth Shorter.
Beth Shorter.
Beth Shorter, just for if maybe somebody knows her.
We have Beth to thank for a lot here in Seattle and in the dance community in general. I wanted to take another question here, which I think is really great. It's from Mahi, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right. But if you are an artist starting out in these COVID times, what would you do? And how would you support yourself while creating art? And I think that's a great question. Like, how do young people coming up now in this time continue to do what they need to do in order to be successful in this field?
Right. I don't know about what you need to do to support yourself. I mean, I think the arts, in supporting yourself inside the arts, it's really difficult. It really is. What I talk about to young artists is how do you nourish yourself in terms of your creativity. So you have to find ways of nourishing yourself, like and so one of the ways, and I think the primary way, is to do something. Do whatever you can do. And I think the thing that I was talking about people with cameras, young artists out and doing something, and I said I didn't mean it to be, it didn't want it to be disparaging, but that's just people figuring out what they can do. Not what you can't do, but what you can do. And I think, I mean, when I first started making work and was living in New York, I mean, often I was so hungry, I had no money. I also often did not have a place to live once I had used up all my options of couch surfing with my friends. And, but the thing that kept me going was doing something. I had to dance, or either I had to make a dance, and, that made the hunger go away momentarily. It made the destituteness, I don't know if that's a word.
It is now.
It is now, disappear. So I would say do something. Like if you make something.
That's great advice. We've got just a couple minutes left here. Is there anything that you want to say? And that could be to this group or just in general right now during these COVID times. I mean, you're saying a lot of it through the season, through the work, through Lyric Suite. But is there something particular that you feel that is inside of you that really needs to be vocalized?
Something inside of me that needs to be vocalized. I maybe maybe is this, and I'm kind of reluctant to say it, but I'm going to say it anyway. I believe what I say. I believe what I say. Sometimes I wonder if I really believe it. And the conclusion that I've come to is that I really do believe what I say. And sometimes I may not say it well or as articulately as I would like, but what's underneath the impulse of stuff, I really believe that. So sometimes around the social justice stuff and blah, 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 I go, do I really believe that? Do I really want to make work about that? Or am I just saying that, And so I'm in a kind of conversation with myself about those things. And I'm interrogating myself often, sometimes consciously, sometimes more often than not unconsciously. So I would say that I really do, I believe what I say.
I think that that is a fantastic note to start wrapping things up on. And we will all listen and continue to listen to what you say, both in your words and through the work that you are putting on stage and on these digital platforms, because it means something to this community, it means something to the world, and it means something to the dancers and the artists that you are, you know, have been responsible for so many decades. So I want to say a personal thank you for everything that you've done and you continue to do in the field, and for tonight. We understand that there's a lot going on, and we all have something that's probably happening tomorrow morning at 7:30 or 8 o'clock. So I appreciate you giving your evening to ArtsFund and to our supporters. So Donald, thank you very much. I'm going to give a couple housekeeping things here, but everyone will receive an email tomorrow with the link to view this recording conversation. And, you know, we welcome your feedback on this event, either directly to us at ArtsFund or through Sarah or through Kate. And thank you all very, very much for attending this evening. And Donald, again, really thank you very much. Part of what you are doing is giving people that hope and that inspiration to, you know, move through this time and through the pandemic and through all of what 2020 has been. So we really appreciate that. And thank you for everything.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Take care.
All right. Bye.